welcome another doctor, Stephen Pace, to the lectern. Stephen's family farm in Cheshire. They are 72,000 colony birds, 64,000 free-range layers, and plus 60,000 birds in rear. They've also got arable interests and sheep as well. They mill and mix their own feed. Academically, Stephen studied for a PhD in enzymes at Leeds University and stayed on as a research manager and a part-time lecturer. Stephen won the EPIC Young Poultry Person of the Year award back in 2016. So we've got another recipient of that prestigious award on the stage this afternoon. And you've also been involved in the ABN NFU Poultry Industry Programme going back a few years ago. Stephen, over to yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Gary. I must say it's unusual now to be called Dr. Pace. Now I'm no longer at the university. When I'm in wellies, my staff don't quite give me that level of credibility, but it's nice to hear it once again. It's also a bit unusual for me to be talking about innovation. My family have been producing eggs since 1930s, and I would say never in that time have we necessarily been the first adapters of any particular piece of technology. We've always kind of waited behind, seen what other people have done, and then thought, oh, that works, yeah, we'll try that. And I think we're very much still doing the same. Obviously, we want to be quick behind those people that are innovators, but we've never quite been the first off the mark. So I'm just going to go through a bit of the history of our farm to begin with. And it all starts back here with Hilda Pace in 1931. She was a bit of a go-getter. And although my great-granddad didn't really want to do much, she wanted to have her own business, so she started with 1,000 free-range hens in some portable sheds around these ponds here, kept there so that they could go down to those ponds to drink the water, so she didn't have to carry water to them. I suppose the progress in her time was first of all coming into the poultry industry, having her own business as a woman back in the time, but then also she brought the birds inside into a static shed close to the farm, removing the risk of predation, improving disease, making sure the disease burden wasn't as harsh, and then also making it easier to look after and give them clean food and water. We then move on to the next generation, my grandparents. We've got Jim and Margaret Pace there. I was talking to my granddad last week, and I asked him, or a couple of weeks ago, sorry, and asked him what was the biggest innovation of his time, and he said that without a shadow of a doubt, he was taken on a trip to the Netherlands by Tony Warner, and he got to see automatic egg collection and automatic feeding. And he knew that we had to get this technology and bring it back onto the home farm, and so that's what he did. And he said very quickly, within 5 years, anyone that hadn't made that step was now out of the job. He also wanted to point out to me that he was one of the first farmers in Cheshire to get his own combine harvester. And then move on to the next generation, my parents, Tony and Jill Pace. The business kind of came full circle as the industry did as a whole, and we went back to free range. And again, not the first, but an early adopter back into free range. And then there's my dad in our mill in the 80s. So that was the first computerized mill we bought and had on the farm, and that really increased the precision of the diets we were making sure we were giving the birds what they needed. And then this is me, aged 11 there for Christmas. Apparently, I asked for chickens. I can't remember, but that's what I'm told. A very cheap present for a chicken farm, I think you'll find. But nonetheless, so as Gary said, I went to the University of Leeds, and I stayed away from the family farm as long as I could. Went on and did a PhD in the use of enzymes. I'm not going to talk about that now because, quite frankly, I haven't got time. And then stayed on and worked as a research manager, mainly because I thought it was important to go and work for someone else before I come back to the family business and have people work for me. And then from there, when I decided to come back home, Leeds asked me to carry on lecturing part-time, and I said yes. But I've slowly dwindled that down from 20% to 5%, and now just doing one lecture for free. Since I've come back on the family farm, there are a few changes we've brought into the mix. I've altered the diet slightly, increasing the fibre, and a few little special goodies for the hens. I've installed a water treatment system on all of the sheds. We're now rearing all our own pullets, whereas before we only did half. I've increased the mill's feeding capacity so we can make more feed for the birds, moved the free range all to multi-tier, expanded the free range flock. This year, bought an egg vending machine and also upgraded our egg grading facility, which is what I'll come on to later. But first, I'm going to kind of take you to the crux of my talk, which is innovation. As a scientist, I think it is vital that we innovate as an industry, but also individual businesses innovate. But as I said, our family business has never been the ones who do that innovation. And that's because it's risky. Do you want to be the first buffalo to go and jump into the river where there might be crocodiles? No, you want to wait and see what other people do and take away that risk from yourself. So how do we do innovation? How do we innovate? How do we make progress as an industry and as an individual business if it is such risky? Well, I think each business has to assess its own risks, look at what it can afford to lose, look at what other people have done, look at what other industries have done, and then try and take those pieces of technology, that science, and go forward and innovate in your own way. And that's what I try and do. So to talk about the egg grader now, this is the old piece of technology that we had up until this year. I don't know how many people are familiar with egg graders, but anyone that does know knows that this is quite an old machine. She was 34 years old. She hadn't missed a day's work. She worked a lot harder than me. And on her last year, she worked harder than ever. We didn't have much time for cleaning or maintenance because we were putting so many eggs through her. All mechanical, no automated anything. It was definitely time for an upgrade this year. So what did we go to? Well, some new technology, or I'm saying newish, because again, to those who know their egg graders will know that the Moba Omnia FT170 has now been usurped by the PX range. But very new for us, lots of new technologies on it that we had to get to grips with, that our staff had to get to grips with. It took us a few months to get used to all of the technology. Just for those who don't know egg graders, some of the technology we've got on here, we've got the egg inspector, using cameras to look at the eggs, picking off dirty and leaking eggs. The crack detector there, using acoustic resonance to listen for hairline cracks. And then the LED blood detector there, which we're using to detect blood within an egg, but also to look at the shell color to make sure that our customers are getting the very best eggs. So again, all this technology has been around for a while now, but for us, very new, lots of big changes, lots of adaptions. A lot of our staff aren't necessarily computer literate. Most of them have been there since I was a child, and I now have to try and teach them how to use this machine. So there was a lot to learn. But we got there in the end. So where are we going now in the future? I did originally call this slide "The Robots Are Coming," but I think it's obvious that the robots are already here. More and more we're seeing in egg grading rooms, robots putting eggs onto egg graders and taking egg boxes off. We're also seeing now more in packing rooms, we're seeing palletizers taking the eggs and putting them onto pallets. And as time goes on, I think this technology is going to become cheaper. We're going to see wages increase. We might start seeing labor shortages depending upon what deals we get with other countries post-Brexit. And so this technology is going to come more into the fore, and smaller businesses are going to be able to afford this technology or have to adapt to this technology to survive. And so more robots are coming. We've already heard plenty of examples, so I won't spend too much time on this, but we've got cameras looking at eggs on the belt, checking the belt isn't blocked, robots moving around to stop floor eggs, and ones picking eggs up off the floor. I think this, obviously, very quickly, this is going to come into all sheds. This will going to take a bit longer. It's a bit of a further step, but again, not overly complicated piece of technology. This, a bit more complicated, a bit more expensive. When I see this, I think, yeah, I can see how this can cost quite a bit because there's quite a bit of kit there. And when you actually watch it, there's a limited number of eggs it can pick up. And you're going to want a stockman to walk around that shed anyway to check the birds. You're not going to want to get rid of stockman altogether. So I can see this being a bit further off and maybe a bit more far-fetched. But definitely all in the pipeline. So this now, my slight remainder of time left, I'm just going to talk about how I don't think all innovations, however, have to be big and expensive. And there's lots of small marginal gains that can be made in a business. And most of the time, these can be made by listening to the people and the staff within your business, listen to their ideas. Lots of little gains to make you more efficient. This is how the best sports teams work. They're after lots of little gains to make sure they're performing at their best. And when we first put in the new egg grader, we had a problem with this conveyor down here. First of all, for those who don't know egg graders, I'll give you a bit of a tour. These conveyors here are bringing packs up. There's a person stood here. They put those packs in a box. They put the box on this conveyor, and that goes off. But we were finding that we stick the lids of the box down with a label, but sometimes that label wouldn't stick or it would rip, and then those lids would flip up and the box would catch on this side up here. So initially we thought, well, we have to lift this up. So we lifted that up out of the way. But then we found that the eggs were too high and the staff couldn't really see the boxes and check on the dates and the eggs. And so we weren't really happy with that solution. So we put that back down and then we moved this box conveyor down. But then all our staff were bending down and hurting their backs. And then they were all moaning to us, complaining. And so then one of my members of staff came to me with the idea of, well, why don't we just put this bar underneath here? It'll catch any of the box lids that are up and put them back down again. And I thought, great, try it. It didn't cost anything because this was just a scrap bit of plastic we had lying around. And it only took him 20 minutes to set up, and very quickly we saw that it worked. You'll see a box comes, the flaps are up. When it comes, there we go, it hits the lid and then it goes down. And that really helped the front of our egg grader work much more efficiently because the boxes weren't piling up. They weren't ripping boxes, and then we had to rebox. And it's just lots of little things like that that I can really think can help businesses out there stay competitive. So just my conclusions now. New tech and science are essential for progress of an individual business, but also of the industry as a whole. But they can be expensive, and so businesses need to assess their own risks. Successful technology will trickle down from businesses who can afford to make bigger risks, and also across businesses, and not all innovations have to be big or expensive. And then my final slide is that I don't necessarily want to be the first one to jump into the river, but I definitely don't want to get left behind on the other side. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. If